abandoned, pregnant, and on the brink of despair. Angela Sinclair's world turned upside down the day her husband, millionaire Richard Sinclair, walked out the door without warning. In a swirl of high-stakes betrayal, hidden agendas, and ruthless legal battles, Angela found the resolve to fight back for herself and the child she carried. What happened next would shake New York's elite to its core, exposing secrets, unveiling alliances, and pitting a scorned wife against her powerful husband and his cunning mistress. Will Angela triumph against overwhelming odds, or will the glitz and glamour of wealth bury her story forever? Stay tuned for a jaw-dropping tale of heartbreak and revenge that you simply can't ignore. Angela Sinclair was born. Angela Moreno, a bright-eyed dreamer from a humble neighborhood in Queens. Her parents, Juan and Maria Moreno, were first-generation immigrants who worked tirelessly to give their children better opportunities. Angela's upbringing was strict, yet loving, instilling in her an unwavering resilience and a conviction that hard work could transform destiny. She possessed an innate optimism that shone through even in the darkest times. Little did she know how much she would rely on that resilience when her life took a devastating turn. Richard Sinclair was the kind of man people read about in Forbes or saw on the covers of business magazines, tall, impeccably dressed with a charismatic smile that could melt ice. He hailed from a wealthy family in Boston, but he made his own millions in real estate development in Manhattan, revitalizing old buildings into modern luxury complexes. A self-styled mogul, Richard had a reputation for flamboyance, throwing lavish parties in penthouse suites and driving the latest sports cars down Fifth Avenue. They met at a charity gala for the American Cancer Society, a prestigious event at the Plaza Hotel. Angela had been there with a close friend, Alyssa Carter, whose father served on the charity's board. Angela's simple black dress stood out among a sea of designer gowns, and Richard, bored by the usual crowd of Manhattan socialites, noticed her sincerity and unassuming beauty. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Angela shared how she was earning her master's degree in sociology at NYU, while Richard spoke about his philanthropic endeavors, scholarship funds, and community projects. Or so he claimed. Their courtship was swift. Dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants in Tribeca, invitations to exclusive art openings at MoMA weekend, getaways to the Hamptons. Richard spared no expense to win Angela over. Though she was initially dazzled by the lifestyle, she also found much to admire in his ambition. He seemed thoughtful at times, earnest in his desire to make a meaningful impact. Of course, the tabloids loved the pairing. Beauty from Queens dates, real estate prints. Despite the publicity and the whirlwind pace, Angela believed that behind the public glamour, Richard was a caring man with genuine warmth. After a year of dating, Richard proposed in a spectacular gesture on the rooftop of his newest luxury condo project overlooking Central Park, accompanied by a string quartet and a lavish fireworks display. Angela, overwhelmed by emotion and his apparent devotion, said yes. A grand wedding followed at St. Patrick's Cathedral, with a reception at the iconic Rainbow Room. The guest list included CEOs, politicians, and celebrities, including rumored appearances by some high-profile figures, such as design mogul Tommy Hilfiger and real estate tycoon Sam Zell. Angela's parents were both awed and proud, despite feeling like fish out of water in such rarefied company. Looking back, Angela often wondered if the glamour of Richard's world blinded her to ominous warning signs. There were rumors about his past relationships, whispers of infidelity or unscrupulous business dealings. But Angela brushed them aside, insisting she trusted him. Now, as she sat alone in a silent mansion, questioning every decision that led her here. She regretted not paying closer attention. The day her dream turned into a nightmare began with a phone call, one that would lead her to discover a deep betrayal that shook the foundation of her marriage and her faith in Richard. Emily Rutherford née Thompson had always been the type of woman people trusted instinctively. There was a steadiness in her gaze, a calm in her voice, and a warmth in her smile that could melt even the most hardened of hearts. Michael met her during their sophomore year at the University of California, Berkeley. He had been rushing across campus, late for a lecture, when he collided with her outside the economics building. Her books spilled everywhere. He bent down to help her, apologizing profusely. She laughed, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face, and said, "Only if you promise to explain Chapter 6 to me afterward." That was the beginning. While Michael studied business and economics with relentless ambition, Emily majored in communications and minored in sociology. She had a natural talent for understanding people, reading between the lines, knowing when to speak and when silence said more. From the beginning, she supported Michael's dreams with unwavering belief. He talked of building empires, changing the world, and she believed him, not because he promised wealth, but because of the fire in his eyes. When he spoke of the future, in the early years, things weren't glamorous. Their first apartment was a cramped studio, with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. They ate instant noodles more often than not, and Emily picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore and a local bakery just to help cover Michael's startup expenses. There were nights when Michael stayed up working until dawn, and Emily sat beside him, with flashcards helping him prep for pitches and networking events. When Rutherford Ventures finally gained traction, it felt like the world had cracked open with possibility. The day Michael closed his first multi-million-dollar deal, he came home, lifted Emily off the floor, and spun her around in the living room shouting, "We did it." They married shortly after graduation in an ethereal ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. The wedding was everything they'd dreamed of. Ivory table linens, twinkling fairy lights strung across rows of grapevines, laughter echoing beneath the golden California sun. Michael vowed to protect her, to build a life worthy of her sacrifice and loyalty. Emily vowed to never let success change the essence of who they were together. Years passed, and their lives transformed dramatically. Emily became the quiet force behind Michael's empire. She didn't attend board meetings or appear in business magazines, but she hosted elegant dinner parties, remembered every investor's spouse's name, and charmed even the most stoic clients. Behind the scenes, she was Michael's mirror, reflecting his best intentions and gently curbing his worst impulses. They moved into a mansion in Pacific Heights, 4 stories of glass, steel, and modern opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay, and the master suite had a fireplace balcony and walk-in closet the size of their old apartment. A vacation home in Lake Tahoe followed. Then came the yacht, the private chef, and designer wardrobes. Emily smiled through it all, though sometimes she missed the days when Michael would fall asleep, mid-sentence beside her. Not because of exhaustion, but because he simply wanted to stay close. She never complained about the solitude that crept in slowly over the years. Michael's empire demanded time, and she understood. He traveled often. New York, London, Singapore. Emily filled her days with charity work, home design projects, and mentoring younger women from underprivileged communities, helping them navigate careers in corporate communications. She had everything society claimed should make a woman happy. Yet sometimes she caught herself staring out the window, too long wondering when exactly the laughter had faded from their home. She noticed the changes in Michael gradually. It began with him staying later at the office, taking more calls during dinner, and responding to texts with vague, distracted nods. His laughter became rarer, and when he smiled, it no longer reached his eyes. He was becoming a man she barely recognized, driven restless and increasingly secretive. Emily wasn't naive. She'd seen how men in power behaved. Several of Michael's peers had traded their wives for younger models, claiming they'd simply grown apart. Emily always hated that phrase. It felt like an excuse for people too cowardly to fight for what they'd built. She'd promised herself they would be different. She and Michael had been through too much, had built too much to ever throw it away for novelty. But something was wrong. He no longer asked about her day. He barely touched her at night. There were nights she found herself alone in their vast bed, wondering if she had become invisible. She tried to ignore the flickers of doubt. She told herself he was stressed, that the pressures of leading a multi-billion-dollar firm weighed on him, that this was just a phase. Then came the night she found him in the guest bedroom at 2 a.m., whispering into his phone. When she stepped into the doorway, he jumped. His explanation was thin. Something about a call with Tokyo. Emily didn't question him outright. She simply watched the way his fingers tightened around the phone and the way his eyes refused to meet hers. Her heart began to fracture. Still she tried. She cooked his favorite meals, suggested weekend getaways, left notes in his suitcase when he traveled, but his responses were lukewarm. He was polite, he thanked her, but she could feel the growing chasm between them, vast and silent. She confided in Lucy Marshall, her best friend since college. Lucy had seen too many of their friends' marriages implode and didn't mince words. "He's cheating," Lucy said, flatly swirling her wine. "I've seen this play before." Emily shook her head. "No, Michael wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Be human. Be tempted." Lucy challenged. "You've been loyal, Emily. But loyalty doesn't guarantee reciprocity. You need to protect yourself." Emily wanted to believe otherwise. She clung to the memories of the boy who carried her books, who cried with joy when they bought their first house, who once told her, "I don't care about the money. I care about building a life with you." But the man in their bed now no longer whispered those things. Late one night, Emily stood on the balcony of their master suite, wrapped in a cashmere robe, the cold biting at her skin. Below, the city sparkled with life. Cars, lights, laughter. Her eyes stung with tears she didn't want to shed. She wasn't crying just for Michael. She was mourning the version of herself who had believed love was enough. In her heart, Emily knew a storm was coming. She didn't know how or when it would strike, but she sensed it with a clarity that cut through the fog of her denial. The loyal wife had stood by quietly for too long. Now she would have to decide who she was without him, and whether she had the strength to face the truth when it finally revealed itself. The day Angela's suspicions transformed into cold, hard truth started like any other. She woke up early, prepared breakfast. French toast, fresh strawberries and coffee, exactly the way Richard liked it. But he barely touched his plate before rushing out, muttering something about an important business meeting downtown. She stood on the balcony overlooking the bustle of Fifth Avenue, trying to ignore the ominous feeling in her gut. Late that afternoon, Angela was preparing for a charity auction they were scheduled to attend when a courier arrived at the penthouse. He handed her a small, discreetly wrapped envelope, assuming it was another event invitation. Angela opened it without much thought. Inside, she found photographs grainy, yet explicit enough to see Richard intimately embracing a woman with dark hair and a striking figure. Her hands shook as she flipped through more photos that showcased the two leaving a hotel holding hands and even sharing a passionate kiss by a private elevator. A note accompanied the pictures. "Your husband is cheating on you. He's been doing it for months. Ask him about the Ormond Hotel." There was no signature. The letters were typed, giving no clue about who sent them. Angela's mind reeled. Her heart pounding in her chest. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and ashamed that someone else knew about this before she did, or at least had the audacity to present it to her like a sinister gift. She clutched the envelope, waiting in the living room, until dusk. Richard finally returned, distractedly loosening his tie and glancing at the mail on the table. When she confronted him with the photos, his face went pale, then quickly hardened. He snatched them from her hand, feigning outrage. "Where did you get these? They're fake. Someone is trying to blackmail me." His protestations sounded rehearsed. Angela demanded to know who the woman was. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming the pictures were altered. Angela's tears and fury mounted. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you haven't been sleeping with her," she demanded, voice trembling. She showed him the hotel receipt from Ormond. Hotel that had accidentally slipped out from one of the pictures. His name, her name, one suite paid in full, with his credit card. Hard to deny. In a sudden switch, Richard dropped his act. He hurled the photos on the table. "Fine, her name is Christina Baxter." He spat. "She's someone I've been seeing, but it's not what you think." Angela's world shattered. Every detail of her life with Richard, every memory, every promise felt like a cruel farce. She could barely breathe through the heartbreak. "How could you do this? How could you lie to me?" she cried. Richard tried to close the distance between them, but she recoiled. "Angela, listen, I can explain." "It's complicated. I never intended for it to get this far." She slapped him. The sound echoed in the cavernous penthouse. "Get out," she commanded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She insisted he leave before she completely lost whatever composure remained. Richard stormed out, leaving Angela alone with only the cold comfort of her shattered reality. Little did he know that this moment, his final exit that evening, would be the first step in Angela's journey to take him down in a way he never anticipated. The following weeks were a haze of heartbreak and confusion. Angela avoided the tabloids, but she could not escape the persistent paparazzi outside her building, nor the swirl of rumors among Manhattan's elite. Friends from high society gatherings offered her half-hearted sympathies, thinly veiled gossip sessions disguised as concern. Angela realized how isolated she'd become in this new life. How few genuine friends she had. Alyssa Carter, her longtime confidant, remained her rock, but Alyssa was frequently out of town. Angela's parents, Maria and Juan, were worried sick. They wanted her to come home, but she resisted clinging to some faint hope of salvaging her marriage. During this tumultuous period, Angela discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she felt dizzy, nearly fainting in the bathroom. A slew of symptoms: nausea, extreme fatigue. Emotional swings led her to take a test. When the result read positive, a mix of fear and excitement warred within her. After the initial shock, she felt an unexpected surge of love for the life growing inside her. This baby was her flesh and blood, entirely innocent, and she vowed to protect it at all costs. Yet the pregnancy weighed on her heart with new anxieties. Richard was the father. How would he react? Would he dismiss the pregnancy as a trap, an inconvenience? Or in some faint corner of her imagination, Did she still hope it might bring him back? The swirl of questions was overwhelming. She resolved to inform Richard, hoping against all logic that it might shift his perspective. When Angela finally gathered the courage to call, the line went to voicemail. Several attempts later, she received a curt text. "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk when I'm free." Days passed without a word. Each night she tossed and turned, feeling the gravity of her predicament. She was pregnant alone and losing faith in everything that once anchored her. In desperation, Angela reached out to Richard's mother, Evelyn Sinclair. Evelyn was a formidable woman, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and fiercely protective of the Sinclair name. Perhaps she could reason with her son. When Angela finally got through, Evelyn maintained a frosty politeness. "I'm sorry to hear about this situation, Angela. However, Richard is a grown man. I'm sure he'll do the right thing." The words rang hollow. Days turned into weeks. Angela found herself pacing the penthouse, which felt eerily silent. The staff had mostly left, some dismissed by Richard, others resigned out of uncertainty about the household's future. Bills still arrived, but she had limited access to the finances. Much of the money was tied up in trusts or business accounts under Richard's name. She had credit cards, but Richard had cut them off. Alone, pregnant, and financially cornered, Angela felt abandoned. A phone call from an old friend provided a flicker of hope. Marcus Whitmore, a lawyer she'd met during a pro bono project at NYU, offered his help. When she explained her predicament, Marcus didn't hesitate. "Angela, you have rights. He can't just leave you without support." For the first time in weeks, she sensed a glimmer of empowerment. Perhaps with Marcus's guidance, she could confront Richard properly, not just for herself, but for the child she carried. Christina Baxter was not new to the game of social climbing. She came from a working-class neighborhood in Queens, not far from Angela's old stomping grounds, though their paths had never crossed. By her early 20s, Christina had reinvented herself, changing her accent, grooming her appearance, and learning the ins and outs of Manhattan's elite circles. She started as a club promoter, then became the face of upscale events, ingratiating herself with wealthy men. Over time, she learned the power of seduction, charm, and strategic networking. Richard first encountered Christina at a charity runway show, one of those extravagant events he attended to maintain a philanthropic facade. Christina was modeling a designer's new line and managed to catch Richard's eye. Later that night, she boldly approached him, sliding a cocktail napkin across the bar with her phone number scrawled in smooth cursive. From that moment, their dalliance began. Christina was meticulous in her approach. She knew Richard was married, but that only fueled her ambition. When she discovered the extent of his fortune, she engineered ways to appear indispensable. She would accidentally show up at the same galas, feigning surprise. She did research on his business interests, impressing him with her feigned knowledge of real estate development. Soon she became his confidant, offering emotional support whenever he complained about stress, often painting Angela as a wife who didn't understand his business demands. The affair escalated quickly, fueled by Richard's arrogance and Christina's calculated pursuit. They met in luxury hotels, ate at secluded Michelin-starred restaurants in Greenwich Village, and even jetted off to Miami under the guise of business trips. Christina took notes every step of the way. She saved receipts, recorded voice notes, and photographed moments that proved their involvement. Evidence she stored in a secure cloud folder. In her mind, if Richard ever tried to cast her aside, she would have ammunition to protect her newfound lifestyle. When Angela discovered the affair, Christina knew it was only a matter of time before the situation blew up. While Richard scrambled to maintain damage control, Christina began planting seeds of her own narrative. She confided in a few strategic friends, some of them reality TV hopefuls, others social media influencers, drop-feeding them tidbits about how Richard had led her on and promised to leave his wife. She played the role of the victim, ensuring that if the story went public, it wouldn't paint her as a mere homewrecker, but as someone misled by a powerful man. Behind the scenes, Christina had ambitions that stretched beyond being an affair partner. She wanted financial security, possibly a ring on her finger, or at least a significant settlement. She saw Angela as an obstacle, someone whose presence in Richard's life prevented him from fully giving in to Christina's demands. The pregnancy, if Christina knew about it, would be an even bigger threat to her plans. While Angela was struggling with heartbreak and an uncertain future, Christina was methodically tightening her grip on Richard, playing to his vanity and fear. If he wanted to keep her from spilling secrets, he would need to keep her satisfied. Little did Christina realize Angela was no longer the naive wife she once was. A collision course was set, and both women were determined not to be the one left empty-handed. Confiding in lawyer Marcus Whitmore was Angela's first smart move. Marcus had a sharp legal mind and an empathetic streak that set him apart from the high-powered, cutthroat attorneys of Richard's world. He carefully reviewed Angela's marriage documents, including the prenuptial agreement. The prenup had been Richard's idea, orchestrated by his family's legal team before the wedding. At the time, Angela had felt she had nothing to hide or fear. She trusted Richard. Now that same document loomed as a potential barrier to her financial security and her unborn child's well-being. Yet Marcus found some interesting angles. For one, Angela had significantly compromised her own education and career opportunities at Richard's request. This factor, coupled with the pregnancy, could be powerful in challenging parts of the prenup, especially under New York state law. Marcus explained, judges aren't fond of punishing a spouse who's been sidelined from their own prospects, especially when a child is involved. With Marcus's counsel, Angela began meticulously documenting everything. She tracked expenses she could no longer pay, due to Richard freezing their joint accounts, recorded the times he ignored her calls about the pregnancy, and even saved text messages where he made veiled threats. Marcus assured her these details would be invaluable should they need to litigate. Aside from legal help, Angela found unexpected support from her NYU professors. When she emailed her old academic advisor, Dr. Rebecca Nguyen, about her situation, Dr. Nguyen offered words of encouragement and an open door to return to the program whenever she could. While it didn't solve her immediate crisis, the reassurance reminded Angela she had her own life path, one that didn't solely revolve around Richard's whims. Her parents, Juan and Maria, remained her emotional anchors. Though they lived in a modest row home in Queens, far from the marble floors of the Sinclair penthouse, their home was a sanctuary of warmth and unconditional love. Angela would drop by, and Maria would cook her comforting meals while gently rubbing her back, telling her in Spanish, "Mija, you will find your strength." Juan, a proud man who rarely showed vulnerability, quietly handed her a small envelope of his own savings, insisting she take care of herself and the baby. Angela, moved to tears, declined, but her father pressed it into her hands, unwavering in his insistence. Angela also had her friend, Alyssa Carter, who had connections in philanthropic circles. Though Alyssa was often traveling, she pulled strings to get Angela invited to exclusive seminars and workshops on female entrepreneurship. Perhaps ironically, these events were typically attended by women seeking investments from the likes of Richard Sinclair, but Angela saw them as opportunities to build her own network. She met potential mentors, philanthropic leaders like Diana Weinstein, who ran a non-profit assisting women in crisis situations. Even a quick chat here or there opened the possibility of forging new alliances outside of her crumbling marriage. The more Angela gathered support, the clearer her mission became. She would not crumble under Richard's betrayal. Instead, she would secure her future, and that of her babies, with Marcus preparing the groundwork and a renewed sense of purpose. Angela took the first confident steps toward a battle she never dreamed she'd have to fight. While Angela quietly strategized, Richard sank deeper into a maze of deception. Eager to preserve his public image, he worked overtime in the media to paint himself as a misunderstood husband in a complicated marriage. Public relations teams churned out press releases about his commitment to philanthropy and ongoing efforts to support charities. He staged photo ops at children's hospitals and homeless shelters, trying to overshadow the gossip swirling about him and Christina behind the scenes. However, Richard was becoming unhinged. The real estate market was shifting. A few of his luxury developments, stalled financing got tighter, and new competition emerged in prime Manhattan locations. Investors demanded transparency, and some started raising eyebrows about his personal controversies. Questions rose. Was he reliable? Was his marriage scandal hinting at deeper professional instability? Richard tried to appease Christina to keep her from stirring more drama. He rented a penthouse suite at the prestigious Ventara Towers, discreetly putting it in her name. He spoiled her with expensive jewelry from Cartier, hoping the gifts would buy her silence and loyalty. Christina, sensing an opportunity, pushed for more. She wanted to be seen as an integral part of his life, not just a secret fling. She pressed him to consider divorcing Angela more aggressively, or at least making a public statement about their separation. Meanwhile, Richard dodged Angela's attempts to discuss the pregnancy. On a rare phone call he answered, he dismissed her news. "I can't handle this right now," he said tersely. "We'll talk when things settle." Angela's repeated pleas for financial assistance went ignored. He assumed she was too timid to act without his goodwill, underestimating both her resolve and Marcus's legal prowess. At the same time, Richard employed his mother's family lawyer, a formidable figure named Malcolm Birnbaum, to draft a restrictive postnup agreement. The document intended to limit Angela's claims in the event of a divorce, especially any spousal support beyond a minimal monthly allowance. Richard's plan was simple corner. Angela financially wearing her down until she agreed to terms favorable to him. He never once considered that Angela would stand her ground, let alone gather the means to fight back on equal footing. In an increasingly paranoid state, Richard also leaned on private investigators to watch Angela. He wanted to ensure she wasn't meeting with lawyers or journalists who could further tarnish his name. The investigation revealed Angela's frequent visits to a legal office in Midtown alarmed. Richard confronted her at their penthouse one evening, banging on the door like a man possessed. Angela opened it cautiously. The confrontation that followed was heated. "You dare involve attorneys behind my back," he snarled. Angela, trembling but steadfast, held her ground. "I gave you every opportunity to do the right thing, Richard. You left me no choice." He stormed off, threatening to drag her through a public fight. She couldn't win. "I'll bury you and your so-called lawyer," he spat. But the look in Angela's eyes told him something had changed. She wasn't the timid housewife anymore. A reckoning was coming, and for once, Richard felt a flicker of apprehension he couldn't entirely dismiss. Angela's life was a whirlwind of doctor's appointments and legal consultations. Her OB/GYN doctor, Catherine Lee, confirmed that despite the stress, her pregnancy was progressing normally. Minimize anxiety. Dr. Lee advised, gently, knowing full well how impossible that seemed, given Angela's marital crisis. Each ultrasound became a refuge of joy, a reminder that something precious was waiting at the end of this painful journey. One particularly rainy afternoon, Angela received a phone call from a blocked number. She hesitated, but answered. A woman's voice whispered urgently, "We have a common enemy, Richard Sinclair. Meet me at Café Lumière tomorrow at noon." Before Angela could ask a single question, the line went dead. Curiosity battled caution, but Angela decided to go. The next day, she stepped into the cozy cafe and scanned the room. In a corner booth sat a woman in dark sunglasses, sipping tea. She beckoned Angela over. Removing the glasses, the woman introduced herself as Ava Heaton, a former employee of one of Richard's real estate holding companies. Ava claimed she had proof of financial misdeeds, embezzlement, fraudulent contracts, and inflated valuations that could bring Richard's empire down. She said she was fired unjustly, shorted on severance, and threatened with legal action if she went public. Angela listened, her heart pounding. Ava pushed a folder across the table. Inside were spreadsheets, email, correspondence, and financial statements showing suspicious transactions. "I'm risking a lot by giving you this," Ava confessed. "But I can't let him ruin any more lives." Though overwhelmed, Angela recognized the power of this information. If Richard was committing fraud, it could compromise any settlement Angela was entitled to. Moreover, it could jeopardize the legacy and trust funds for her baby. But stepping into this territory was dangerous. She asked Ava why she didn't go to the authorities directly. "Richard's lawyers would bury me," Ava explained, eyes glinting with anger. "They'd drag my name through the mud, claim I stole data. I need someone with a legitimate reason to use this evidence, someone who won't be easily dismissed. That's you." Angela felt a mixture of dread and determination. This was bigger than just spousal support or child custody. If what Ava revealed was true, it could land Richard in prison, or at least force him into a corner where he'd have to negotiate. Angela reached for her phone, snapping photos of each document, her hands shaking. She thanked Ava and promised to keep her identity confidential for now. That night, Angela met with Marcus and laid out the folder. As he pored over the documents, his professional composure cracked into surprise. "This is damning. If it holds up, Richard is in serious trouble. But be prepared for backlash. He'll fight tooth and nail to protect himself." For Angela, the evidence represented a turning point. No longer was she just a forsaken wife seeking justice. Now she had leverage, real leverage, to hold Richard accountable for every wrongdoing, with her unborn child's future at stake. Angela steeled herself. She would not back down no matter what storm Richard tried to unleash. The decision to proceed with legal action solidified when Angela realized Richard had stopped paying the penthouse mortgage and utilities. She received eviction notices and panicked phone calls from property managers. With nowhere else to turn, she packed her belongings and moved in with her parents, determined to spare herself the humiliation of being thrown onto the street. Marcus wasted no time filing a lawsuit, seeking both divorce and substantial alimony, child support, and damages for emotional distress. He also initiated a separate investigation into Richard's business dealings, forwarding some of Ava Heaton's documents to trusted financial analysts who could corroborate their authenticity. While criminal charges were not within Angela's direct power to file the evidence, could be turned over to the district attorney if needed. Word spread fast in Manhattan's social and legal circles. Suddenly, Angela was no longer the quiet, jilted spouse. She was a formidable adversary, armed with claims that threatened Richard's carefully curated image. Gossip columns churned out stories speculating about Richard's alleged embezzlement, while social media was abuzz with commentary on the sensational case. In the midst of the frenzy, Christina Baxter tried to salvage her own position. She clung to Richard, pushing for public reassurance of their relationship, or at least a financial arrangement that ensured her future. But Richard was under immense pressure from multiple fronts: investors, lawyers, the press. He no longer had the bandwidth to placate Christina, which made her increasingly restless. She started dropping hints in online fashion forums and gossip sites, implying she had her own trove of damaging information if she wasn't treated fairly. Still, she stopped short of betraying Richard, outright calculating that her best move was to see how the court drama played out. Angela's pregnancy advanced. She was in her second trimester, beginning to show. Despite the chaos, she discovered a surprising inner peace whenever she felt the baby flutter. Her mother's home became a refuge. She helped Maria cook meals, watch telenovelas in the evenings, and occasionally tried to distract herself with crocheting baby blankets. During these quieter moments, a growing determination fueled her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her child's right to a secure future. Marcus scheduled a meeting with Richard's legal team to discuss the possibility of an out-of-court settlement. The day of the meeting, Angela and Marcus walked into a high-rise conference room overlooking Central Park. Richard, flanked by Malcolm Birnbaum and two junior associates, barely looked at Angela. His face was taut, jaw clenched. The tension in the room was palpable. Birnbaum opened with a dismissive tone, offering a paltry settlement. "We believe Mrs. Sinclair is entitled to a modest monthly allowance. Given the short duration of the marriage and the prenuptial agreement." Angela felt her blood boil. Marcus smiled thinly and slid copies of key financial records across the sleek table. "We also have reason to believe that Mr. Sinclair engaged in fraudulent activities," Marcus said, his voice measured. "This evidence can be introduced in court if no fair agreement is reached." Richard's eyes flashed with alarm. He shot a glare at Angela. The meeting ended in a stalemate, but Angela could see the cracks. For the first time, Richard appeared genuinely uneasy. The road to court was set, and both sides were gearing up for a showdown with massive consequences. The trial commenced on a crisp morning at the New York Supreme Court. A throng of reporters and curious onlookers gathered outside cameras, flashing as Angela, with her baby bump visible beneath a tailored maternity dress, made her way through the crowd. Richard arrived separately, a scowl plastered on his face. His expensive suit and aloof demeanor only reinforced the distance between them. Inside the wood-paneled courtroom, Judge Catherine Friedman presided. An experienced jurist known for her no-nonsense approach, Friedman was unimpressed by high-profile theatrics. She immediately laid ground rules, cautioning both parties that outbursts and media manipulation would be met with stern consequences. Marcus opened Angela's case with a measured emotional appeal. He described her sacrifices for the marriage, leaving her master's program, giving up her own aspirations, and the emotional toll inflicted by Richard's affair and subsequent abandonment. Evidence of Richard's refusal to acknowledge the pregnancy or provide support was laid out, including text messages, phone call logs, and anecdotal testimony from Angela's mother, Maria, who described Angela's distress in heartbreaking detail. Richard's legal team countered with a narrative portraying Angela as an opportunist. They argued that she benefited from the lavish lifestyle and was now trying to cash in further. Malcolm Birnbaum insisted that any wrongdoing on Richard's part was a personal failing, separate from his obligations under the prenuptial agreement, which Angela had signed willingly. Then came the curveball financial records Marcus presented. spreadsheets detailing suspicious wire transfers and shell companies tied to Richard's developments. One of the star witnesses was Ava Heaton, who testified about her experiences within Richard's company, how she'd been asked to falsify documents, and then fired when she refused. She recounted internal emails from Richard referencing creative accounting, which was code for illegal funneling of funds. The gallery buzzed with surprise. On cross-examination, Birnbaum tried to discredit Ava, painting her as a disgruntled ex-employee. But Ava held her composure, referencing Times dates and direct quotes. Judge Friedman allowed the evidence into the record, though she made no immediate ruling on the validity of the allegations, stating she would consider them in conjunction with further expert testimony. As the day progressed, Christina Baxter was called to the stand by Angela's team, an unexpected twist that sent murmurs through the courtroom. She arrived wearing designer attire, looking more like she was attending a fashion premiere than a legal proceeding. Her testimony was guarded, but under oath she admitted to the affair and revealed that Richard had promised her financial security if she kept their relationship discreet. While she tried to downplay her motivations, cross-examination painted her as complicit in hiding funds. She clammed up, refusing to provide further detail about offshore accounts or hush money she may have received, claiming she didn't recall. The tension in the courtroom peaked when Richard took the stand. Barely meeting Angela's gaze, he tried to justify his actions, chalking up the affair to a moment of weakness. He disparaged the financial allegations as a smear campaign, accusing Angela of colluding with a bitter ex-employee, but his bravado cracked under Marcus's pointed questions and the mountain of documented evidence. By the end of the first week, the public narrative shifted dramatically. The once untouchable real estate mogul was no longer seen as a misunderstood husband. Evidence of corporate malfeasance, combined with his callous treatment of a pregnant wife, painted a far darker picture. The stage was set for a bombshell verdict, one that could change Angela's life forever. Tension soared as the trial reached its midpoint. Judge Friedman allowed both parties to present additional witnesses and finalize depositions. Courtroom gossip suggested Richard was scrambling to contain new revelations, including potential witness statements from disgruntled investors who had lost money in his stalled developments. Moreover, it became apparent that the district attorney's office was paying close attention to the proceedings, especially the financial data exposed by Angela's team. The biggest twist came when an anonymous tip was delivered to Marcus's office containing a flash drive with more damning correspondence between Richard and key executives in his organization. The emails explicitly discussed forging contractual documents and concealing losses from shareholders. The tipster turned out to be none other than one of Richard's junior associates, who had grown uneasy with the lies and found a way to leak the files. When Marcus submitted the drive as evidence, Birnbaum exploded in protest, claiming it was unverified and illegally obtained. Judge Friedman allowed a forensic review, and the digital fingerprints confirmed the emails were authentic. During a recess, Richard approached Angela in the corridor, a desperation in his eyes she had never seen before. "Angela," he began quietly, "let's talk. We can settle this without dragging each other through more mud." He proposed a substantial payout, enough for Angela to live comfortably and raise their child on the condition that she withdraw the lawsuit and make no further mention of criminal allegations. For a brief second, Angela felt the old pang of love for the man she had once married. But she remembered the months of abandonment, the cruelty and the unborn child he had so callously ignored. Too late, she replied, her voice resolute. "I trusted you once. That's never happening again." She turned away, leaving Richard to seethe in silent frustration. Christina Baxter's actions also threw a wrench into the case. Afraid of becoming a scapegoat, She privately reached out to Marcus, offering more incriminating information in exchange for immunity from any potential legal fallout. Through this, Angela's team uncovered that Christina had personally facilitated the creation of shell companies at Richard's behest, receiving a sizable commission. The Mistress, who once reveled in her victory over Angela, was now an inadvertent ally. Christina's defection triggered chaos in Richard's camp, undermining his credibility even further. As proceedings neared conclusion, the media labeled the case as the Sinclair scandal. Major outlets like the New York Times and CNN covered the trial, dissecting every revelation. Online people rallied behind Angela as a symbol of resilience against privileged men who thought they were above the law. In a final act of cunning, Birnbaum tried to claim Angela was meddling with crucial evidence, an accusation that fell apart under scrutiny. Judge Friedman dismissed the motion, reiterating that the financial records and witness testimonies were sufficiently vetted. Sensing the tide of the trial, Birnbaum filed motions to postpone hearings, hoping to buy time. But Friedman was firm, pressing both sides to expedite. Ultimately, it became clear that Richard was cornered. The illusions he had crafted were shattered, replaced by an avalanche of facts and testimonies pointing toward his guilt both in his marriage and his business dealings. His attempts to shift blame onto Angela or Christina simply didn't resonate. With the final hearing looming, all that remained was the judge's decision, a verdict that would either vindicate Angela's fight for justice or send her back to the margins of a broken dream. The final day of the trial was a spectacle. Every seat in the courtroom was filled, and the overflow crowd congregated in the hall, straining to catch fragments of the proceedings. Angela arrived early, feeling her baby move gently in her womb, a reassuring reminder of why she fought so hard. Richard walked in, pale, his confident stride reduced to a stiff shuffle. Judge Friedman began by addressing the divorce and financial settlement. She stated plainly that Richard, by ignoring his pregnant wife and cutting off financial resources, had violated the spirit of support inherent in marriage. The judge invalidated key sections of the prenuptial agreement, citing the grossly imbalanced circumstances under which Angela was left. The courtroom sat in silence as Friedman awarded Angela a substantial monthly spousal support and child support package. Additionally, Friedman granted Angela a sizable portion of Richard's assets, ensuring not only the baby's welfare, but also Angela's long-term stability. Yet the drama didn't end there. Friedman also addressed the allegations of financial malfeasance. While the divorce court couldn't hand down criminal penalties, the judge noted that enough evidence had surfaced to warrant further investigation by prosecutors. She strongly recommended the case be forwarded to the district attorney's office, stating, "The court cannot ignore evidence of widespread fraud. This matter demands a thorough legal review by the appropriate authorities." A hush fell over the room. Angela glanced at Marcus, relief flooding her. They had done it. They hadn't just secured financial justice. They had exposed a web of deceit that could no longer be hidden. Richard's expression was a mix of disbelief and impotent rage. Christina, seated behind Richard's legal team, looked visibly shaken. Her dreams of living as a millionaire's companion were crumbling before her eyes. As Friedman finished reading her judgment, gavel slamming on the wooden desk, the flurry of reporters rose to unleash questions. Angela's name rang out in a cacophony of voices, but she kept her head high, guided by Marcus and Alyssa as they navigated the camera-laden exit. Outside, Angela hesitated briefly, turning to face the crowd. She took a breath, then calmly stated, "I hope my story helps others understand. You can stand up for yourself, no matter how powerful the opposition seems." Then she continued on her way, ignoring the further torrent of inquiries. The next few weeks were a blur. Angela moved into a modest but comfortable apartment on the Upper West Side. Arranged through the settlement's immediate disbursement, she resumed her studies at NYU, determined to complete her master's degree before the baby arrived. Meanwhile, Richard's empire began to collapse under the weight of investor lawsuits and the looming criminal investigation. Christina Baxter attempted to vanish from the public eye, but rumors suggested she was also under scrutiny for her involvement. Through it all, Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose. She woke each morning aware of her growing belly. Her future brightened by the knowledge that she had not only survived, but overcome betrayal of the highest order. In time, she believed she would find closure. For now, she savored the sweet taste of victory, buoyed by the promise she made to protect her child at all costs. In the months that followed the trial, Angela's life slowly fell into a new, more peaceful rhythm. The tabloids eventually found other scandals to chase, and Angela was able to reclaim a measure of anonymity. She dedicated herself to finishing her sociology degree, diving into research projects centered on family law and socio-economic disparities, a subject now deeply personal to her. She wrote papers on how legal systems often fail marginalized spouses when wealthy partners exploit prenuptial agreements. Professors praised her for turning her life experience into academic insight that could help others. Her pregnancy progressed, and with each milestone, hearing the baby's heartbeat, the first flutter of a kick, Angela felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her mother accompanied her to Lamar's classes, and her father, while initially awkward about the idea of childbirth, proudly showed off ultrasound photos to his co-workers at the construction site. It became a family affair, grounded in warmth and genuine love. Meanwhile, Richard's fall from grace was both swift and public. Investigations led to criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, and multiple lawsuits hammered the once glamorous Sinclair real estate empire. Despite attempts to negotiate plea deals, the evidence was simply too damning. Christina Baxter was subpoenaed, and the last Angela heard, Christina had turned state's witness in exchange for leniency. The woman who had once lauded her affair over Angela now sang a different tune in front of prosecutors. Periodically, Angela wondered if Richard felt remorse, not just for betraying her, but for risking the stability of their unborn child. His minimal attempts at contact came through stiff legal channels, yet Angela refused to let bitterness shape her future. With the help of therapy, she learned to separate the heartbreak from her sense of self-worth. She resolved that her child would know they were conceived in love. Whatever chaos followed was on Richard, not on them. Finally, on a bright, brisk morning in late spring, Angela gave birth to a baby boy. Mateo Sinclair, Moreno, Marcus, and Alyssa visited the hospital, bearing gifts and wide smiles. Angela's parents wept joyfully, marveling at their tiny grandson. The moment Angela held Mateo, she felt an indescribable wave of fulfillment. In that instant, every hardship, every tear shed in her darkest hours, felt like stepping stones leading to this precious miracle. A few weeks later, comfortably settled back in her apartment, Angela sat in a rocking chair with Mateo asleep in her arms. She gazed out the window at the Manhattan skyline. The city she once found intimidating was now just a place like any other, a tapestry of triumph and tragedy. She felt neither hatred nor regret, only a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and a daunting legal battle. In the end, she emerged stronger, forging a new path for herself and her son. As she softly hummed a lullaby, Angela realized that life's storms often pave the way for new beginnings. She had proven to herself and to the world that even a millionaire's abandoned wife could rise from the ashes stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey through heartbreak, scandal, and ultimate triumph. Angela Sinclair's determination and courage remind us that no matter how powerful the opposition, justice can prevail when we fight for our rights and refuse to be silenced. If you found yourself moved by Angela's story, her grit in the face of betrayal, her relentless pursuit of truth, and her unwavering love for her unborn child, then please show your support. Call to action. Let us know you appreciate compelling stories of resilience and justice. Share, spread Angela's remarkable journey to inspire those who may be facing their own battles. Subscribe, stay tuned for more dramatic, real-life inspired stories that showcase the human spirit's ability to overcome even the darkest obstacles. Hit the notification bell and be the first to witness more stories of courage and hope.